Good morning, students. Today we will understand line by line explanation of the chapter Should Visit Hit Mommy, and this is second part of the chapter. Okay, and in first part I have already introduced the chapter. So should visit hit mommy, and we all know very well that the story revolves around Jack, who is a father to two kids, okay, John and Bobby. John, Jack's daughter, 4 years old. His wife Claire is carrying their third child. Jack had a So let's start with the chapter. The theme is about the relation of a little girl and her parents, about the fantasy of children and the messages of the stories for them. Okay, so this is the chapter. So let's start with the line by line explanation. Should visit hit mommy. Before you read, here is a story about the worldview of a little child and the difficult moral questions she raises during the story session with her father. Actually, what is the basic introduction of this chapter is that the story revolves around Jack, who is a father to two kids, John and Bobby. John means Joe, who is sitting just beside to her father Jack, and Bobby, okay, 2 years old boy. His wife Claire is carrying their third child. Jack had a habit of telling his daughter Joe a story every evening and on Saturday afternoon naps. This time, when he was telling her a story, she interrupts in him and asks him questions whenever she feels that things are not being things whenever she feels that things that are being told are not right. So Jack now finds himself in a fix and does not know how to resolve Joe's questions because Joe is now grown up girl. Okay, she is now 4 years old. Okay, and started going to school. So Jack now finds himself in a fix and does not know how to resolve Joe's questions. Parents feel that children should do or think exactly what they are told, and it happens. They should believe whatever they are told by their parents, but is this the right attitude? Tell me. But is this the right attitude? This moral question is raised by the story and left for the reader to decide what should be done. Okay. So let's start. In the evenings and for Saturday naps, like today's, Jack told his daughter Jo a story out of his head. This custom began when she was two. Was itself now nearly 2 years old. Means system was started when Joe was 2 years old, and now it has been 2 years. It means Joe became 4 years old. Joe was a 4 years old, okay, and his head felt high and his head felt empty. Whose head? Jack's. Each new story was a slight variation of basic tale. A small creature, usually named Roger Fish, Roger Squirrel, Roger Chipmunk, had some problem and went with it to the wise old owl. The owl told him to go to the wizard, and the wizard performed a magic spell that solved the problem, demanding in payment a number of pennies greater than the number that Roger creature had, but in the same breath directing the animal to a place where the extra pennies could be found. Then Roger was so happy he played with many games with other creatures and went home to his mother just in time to hear the train whistle that brought his daddy home from Boston. So this is the you can say in the evening means every evening, and on Saturday afternoon naps means short sleep. Nap means beta short sleep. Jack used to tell his daughter during the day when we take short sleep, it is we called it nap. Okay, so in the evening and for Saturday naps. So every evening and on Saturday afternoon naps, Jack used to tell his daughter a bedtime story. This habit started when this habit started when Joe was 2 years old, and now that Joe was 4 years old. Jack did not have any creative ideas for stories. Okay. So we can see over here each new story was a slight variation of basic tale. Means most of the stories that he used to tell Joe revolve around the you can say revolve around the same plot concerning an animal named Roser. And in every story, sometime Roser mouse, sometime Roser frog, sometime Roser kangaroo. Okay, and in every story Roser used to be a different animal with some kind of a problem. Means he just changed the animal and the name would be same, Roser. Okay, and in every story Roser used to be different animal with some kind of a problem. Then Roser would go to with his problem, go to this, go with his problem to Owl. Okay, to Owl to take help, who would in turn tell him go to the wizard. Then Roser would take his problem to the wizard. Okay, Roser would take his problem to the where wizard. Roser would take Owl, and then Roser would go to the wizard to solve his problem. Okay, and then what happened? Roser would take his problem to the wizard, who would help him in exchange for some pennies, mostly a bit more than what Roser had with him. After helping him, the wizard would ask him to go to a certain place for what? To fetch some more pennies, and Roser would do exactly like that. Then after playing the wizard, then after playing, okay, you can say Roser returned, would go back, and all the other animals would start playing with him. He would be very happy, and later he would return home just in time to wait for his father, who would be returning from Boston by train. So in every story there was some, you can say, basic story remained same. What was the basic story? Sometime Roger Mouse, he had some problem, he would go to what? Owl directed him to the wizard. Then he would go to see wizard would solve the problem, and in return he would ask them money. Okay, and then Roser Mouse would give money and then return back in the forest. He would happy, and then his father returned, and then Jack described their supper at home, and then Joe slept and the animal slept. Then next day there was a Roser, you can say deer. He had a problem. He would go to meet Owl. Owl would directed him to wizard, and then wizard would solve the problem and asked some money. Okay, and then what would happen? He would give money and problem was solved. Okay, then he would return. Then Jack describes their supper, and at night what would happen? Joe would sleep, and deer would sleep. So this is the basic story, and in every story there was a slight variation. Okay, so let's start. Then Roser was so happy. He played many games with other creature and went home to his mother. Okay, just in time to hear the train whistle that brought his daddy home from Boston. Jack. Okay, Jack described their supper, and the story was over. Working his way through this scheme was especially fatiguing on Saturday because Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore. Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore, and knowing this made the ride seem futile. So supper means beta an evening meal, typically a light or informal one. Fatiguing means what? A cause to feel exhausted. When you feel exhausted, okay. Second line, fatiguing when you feel what? Exhausted, thakavat, right? A social custom. Okay, Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore, and knowing this made the right means why right word is used over here? Because it was a daily practice. Okay, for Joe seemed futile means pointless. Okay, and the little girl, not so little anymore, the bumps her feet made under the covers were half feet down the bed, the big double bed that they let her be in for naps and when she was sick. had at last arranged herself, and from the way her fat face, deep in a pillow, shone in the sunlight, shifting through the drowned shades, it does not seem fantastic that some magic would occur and she would take her nap. Like an infant of two, her brother Bobby was two and already fell and already asleep with his bottle. Jack asked, "Who shall the story be about today?" So, Jack now Jack had now started getting tired of this daily routine. Because why, beta? Because he had run out of the ideas for the story. Okay. Also, Joe did not sleep listening to the story anymore. He had started what? He had started feeling that that practice was just a waste of time. What practice? Telling a story. Okay, and there was no point doing it. He also noticed that Joe had started growing big and her legs now stretched halfway down the bed when she snuggled in for her story, with all the light coming in from the window over her face. You can see that was deep in the pillow. Jack knew that she won't be sleeping soon. Bobby, okay? Bobby, her brother. Whose brother, beta? Bobby, her brother. Whose brother? Joe's brother. Bobby, her brother, Joe's brother, had almost gone for sleep. Okay, Bobby, her baby brother, who was 2 years old, was already sleeping with his bottle in his mouth. When Jack asked Joe that who should the story be about that day. Okay, so see, who shall the story be about today? Joe squeezed her eyes shut and smiled to be thinking. She was thinking, her eyes open. Her mother's blue skunk, she said firmly. Might be she had gone through this name in the school. So what happened when father asked? Jack knew that she won't be sleeping soon. So he asked Joe, who should the story be about that day? She thought for a while and replied that she wanted it to be of a skunk. Jack then thought that she must have heard about this animal in nursery school and also got excited as he had a new story for his story. As he had a new hero for his story. Okay, a new animal. They must talk about skunks at nursery school. Having a fresh hero momentarily steered Jack to create enthusiasm. All right, he said, once upon a, and father had started story. Once upon a time in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature by the name of Rosa Skunk. And it smelled very bad. So I have already told you what? That every animal was named what? Skunk. So, Roser. Every animal was named Roser. So, here also, skunk name would be Roser. And it smelled very bad. Father had started the story and yes, Joe said, he smelled so bad that none of the other little woodland creatures would play with him. Joe looked at him solemnly. She had not foreseen this. Whenever he would go out to play, Jack continued with jest, remembering certain humiliations of his own childhood. All of the other little animals would cry, "Oh, here comes Roger, stinky skunk," and then they would run away. And Roger skunk would stand there all alone, and two little round tears would fall from his eyes. The corners of the Joe's mouth dropped down. Why? Because Joe was expressing her feelings with the story, and her lower lip bent forward as he traced with a forefinger along the side of her nose the course of one of Rosa Skunk's tears. So, what happened over here? That we would see over here, father. Then Jack started the story. The story started with the Rosa skunk living in the forest. Jack said that Rosa smelled bad. Okay, you can see over here skunk is an animal and gives a very foul smell. Okay, so none of the other animals in the forest like to play with him. All the other animals would start running away. All the other animals would start running away from him. Okay, and Whenever he would go out to play at this moment, Jack was recollecting about certain humiliation that he had faced during his childhood. It means Jack was telling his own story. Means whatever he felt in his childhood, he was describing. At this moment, Jack was recollecting about certain humiliations that he had faced during his childhood for being foul smelling. Means Jack had the same problem, father. Then Joe asked whether Roger would see the wise owl. Jack was sitting beside her and noticed that Joe was getting anxious with the story. Okay, and you can see over here that Joe. Joe became very sad. The corners of Joe's mouth dropped down and a lower lip bent forward as he traced with a forefinger along the side of her nose. Becoming means she was very sad, okay? And she wanted Roger skunk to go to meet owl, okay? And that's why won't he see owl? Won't he see the owl? She asked in a high and faintly roughened voice. Sitting on the bed beside her, Jack felt the cover stuck as her legs swished tensely. Why? Because she had not foreseen this. She had not expected this. उसने ये सोचा नहीं था कि ऐसा कुछ स्टोरी में होगा. Okay, and then he was pleased with this. He was pleased with this moment. He was telling her something true, something she must know, and had no wish to hurry on. But downstairs the chair was scrapped, and he realized he must get down to help clear paint the living room would work. Okay, so while he walked along very sadly, and Miss Father was taking time. Okay, while he walked along very sadly and came to a very big tree, and in the tip top of the tree was an enormous wise owl. Good. Who said this? Good. Joe. Okay, so what happened over here? Then Joe asked whether Roger would see the wise owl. Jack was sitting beside her and noticed that Joe was getting anxious with the story and felt pleased with it. Why? Because he did not want to hurry and wanted to make the story more intense, as he wanted to convey a message through it. The main point is that would like to father would like to give a message. Father would like to give a message to his daughter, okay, through this story. But the problem is that, but downstairs the chair is scrapped. Who was scrapping? Was a scrapping chair. Scrapping means drag or pull a hard or sharp. Okay. So Jack heard a voice downstairs of a chair being pulled and realized that he must go down to help his wife paint the living room, but had to continue with the story as Joe had not slept yet. So Jack continued that Roger Skunk was sad, and as he walked, he came across a tree where he saw the wise owl. The skunk then shared his problem with the wise owl, and the owl started thinking of how he could help the little skunk. Okay, so we would see over here Joe became happy and that the wise owl would ask him to go to the visit, as she had known about the basic plot of the stories her dad used to tell her. Fine. So what would happen over here? Then what happened? Good, Mr. Owl, Roger Skunk said. All the other little animals run away from me because I smell so bad. So you do? The owl said. Very, very bad. What can I do? Roger Skunk said, and he cried very hard. The wizard, the wizard. Joe shouted and sat right up, and a little golden book spilled from the bed. So what happened over here? When Joe told Joe, then Jack continued with the story that the owl told Roger to go to see the visit for his problem. Okay. Then Joe interrupted him and asked him. Now what would see? We will see over here what would happen. Up to now we have understood that Roger Skunk went to meet owl. Okay, and then he shared his problem that all the other little animals run away from him. Why? Because he gave very foul smell. So you do? The owl said, वो तो तुम में से आ रही है, very very bad. What can I do? Roger Skunk sat and he cried very hard. Then Roger Skunk started crying over there. The wizard, the wizard. Joe shouted and sat right up because Joe knew the basic. Joe knew the basic story. Why? And Jack continued with the story that the owl told Roger to go to see the wizard for his problem. But Joe interrupted him and asked why. Because what would happen over here, that Joe is a grown up girl and she had started what interrupting. Okay, that's why Roger Skunk said, and he cried very hard, the wizard, the wizard. Joe shouted and sat right up, and a little golden book spilled from the bed. Means instead of sleeping, she sat down on the bed. Now, Joe, dad is telling the story. Do you want to tell daddy the story? Now, what would happen over here? Jack got irritated. Jack got irritated because he was trying to make her sleep, but she was not sleeping, and even she was disturbing him in this in a story telling session. So now, Joe, daddy is telling the story. Do you want to tell daddy the story? Now we would see in our next class what, that whether Jack continue the story or not, or what would happen next when Roger Skunk would go to see wizard. Fine. So we will see in our next class. Thank you. Have a nice